And Mr. Hammerberg can expand on that further if needed. In conclusion, House Bill 62 provides a targeted exemption to allow further research and testing to be done here in Maryland to advance our nation's security. The skilled professionals at Aberdeen Proving Ground have a proven track record of doing this work and producing technologies in ways that protect the workforce, the community, and the environment, and Commerce is proud to support their work. The Maryland Department of Commerce respectfully requests a favorable report with amendment on House Bill 62. And if I can, Mr. Chair, I'd like to turn it over to other members of the panel.
Yep, we're just trying to fix the visual, but I think the audio is still working, so we're going to continue. So please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bryson Popham appearing before you on behalf of the Army Alliance in support of House Bill 62. I will get right to it, but first I want to say that the gentleman at the end of the table, Mr. Albro and Mr. Malone, are appearing at my request today. This bill is unlike any other I have ever lobbied at all, and I've been walking these halls for many, many years, decades. It is unique in this respect. It first appeared as Senate Bill 889 in 2021. For a number of reasons, that bill went in the drawer. We started early last year with the help of your counterpart, Mr. Chairman, Senator Feldman, over in EEE. And the high point, the culmination, if you will, of that effort occurred on May 29th, 2024, on the second floor of the State House in a meeting arranged by the governor's legislative office, in which our special guest was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Kingston Reef, who vocalized his support for this legislation. The committee has in its file a letter from Mr. Reef. That's important because the last time around, we did not have any such statement from the U.S. Army. Make no mistake, this is a national security issue, and we fully understand, appreciate, and intend to work with the committee to address the environmental needs of our citizens as they are expressed in the law. And this change reflects a significant change in the mission, which has gone from 30 years ago, the destruction of large stockpiles of chemical weapons that existed in Aberdeen and around the country, to today taking small quantities of substances from battlefields far away, places like Syria, Iraq, even North Korea, not itself a battlefield, but a producer of these weapons. And the folks at Aberdeen protect our war fighters by analyzing these substances and developing countermeasures for them. It is a very important bill, and we strongly urge a favorable report on it. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn this over to Mr. Albro, if I may. Just want to make sure you're paying attention.
Can you hear me? Is that okay? Don't touch the button.
Speak up.
Just press, it says do not press. Do I press the button?
Don't
press it.
Yeah, here, Tom.
I'll use that one. Here we go. All right, I'm going to have to lean over here.
Yeah, switch seats. Switch seats. Switch seats.
Let me switch seats. Technical difficulties. Now you can hear me. Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties there. Good afternoon, Chairman Corman and members of the committee. My name is Tom Albro, and I am here today as the former president of the Army Alliance, as the chairman of the Maryland Defense Research Coalition, and as a former U.S. Army officer stationed at Aberdeen Proving Ground. The Army Alliance is a non-profit civic organization founded in 1999 with the goal of achieving or promoting the well-being of programs and organizations at Aberdeen Proving Ground. The Maryland Defense Research Coalition was established in 2021 to promote community support of and the language change proposed in House Bill 62. The coalition currently consists of 18 companies, organizations, and otherwise nonprofits, all the way up to the Harford County Executive. Pardon me. As a chemical officer stationed at Aberdeen Proving Ground in 1983, I was personally involved in demilitarizing chemical weapons both here in the U.S. and across the globe. Throughout my 40-year career, I have
Get that. Can you try again?
Sorry. I have lived, worked, and raised a family in Harford County, and over that time supported Aberdeen Proving Ground and its chemical biological defense organizations. The U.S. Army Chemicals Biological Center is the nation's preeminent chemical and biological defense R&D center and a global leader in that regard. The center is also the only location in the U.S. as defined by the Chemical Weapons Convention Treaty where chemical warfare materials can be produced in quantities specifically needed for research, development, and demonstration activities. Those activities cover all chemical agent mitigation strategies, including incineration. The Chemical Biological Center has a long and collaborative relationship working with the Maryland Department of the Environment. Together, they have allowed the center to successfully execute its vital mission while protecting both the environment and its local citizens. With MDE oversight, the center will continue executing its mission safely and to the requirements established by Maryland law. As currently written, Maryland law constrains the Chemical Biological Center from fulfilling its mission to investigate technologies, to protect our warfighters, as well as to protect our homeland from chemical threats. For these reasons, we encourage a favorable report for House Bill 62. Thank you.
Good day. My name is Rob Malone, and I'm an environmental scientist at the Chem Bio Center at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. I would like to thank the committee for allowing me time to provide the why behind the need for this legislation, as well as its importance to our nation and the world in eliminating WMD. You have heard from the other speakers about my organization's unique expertise and robust purpose-built test facilities. There's a fact sheet in the file providing further details on our workforce, facilities, and why Aberdeen Proving Grounds is the only place in the U.S. where we can fabricate and store chemical agents for these test programs. The fact sheet also provides our OSHA safety statistics that show that our workforce, who regularly operates in chemical agent environments, are safer than if they worked in the average flower shop and on par with working at a bank or in an insurance company. In 2013, my co-workers and I were called upon to destroy Syria's chemical weapons stockpile, eliminating 600 metric tons of chemical agent at sea with no impacts to the environment and no safety issues. This was only achievable because of the depth of knowledge and breadth of experience that our Maryland-based workforce possesses. Since then, our adversaries have only become more brazen in their use of WMD. The Department of Defense must develop and field technologies that provide the ability to defeat these weapons before they can be used on our soldiers and our allies. As I speak to you today, my organization is preparing to destroy the remnants of Syria's chemical weapons program and Russia's use of chemical weapons in the Ukraine. We are currently unable to destroy certain types of chemical weapons from these and other enemy nations with our existing proven technologies. We also need new tactical solutions for our warfighter to destroy chemical weapons on the battlefield. Often their missions need to be performed with equipment that is man-portable and on munitions that cannot be destroyed using any other approach. These critical solutions are at risk of being unavailable to our warfighters due to the current permitting requirements. Thank you.
That concludes our panel's testimony, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, for some reason I thought you said the Department of Environment. Did I miss them?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Edward Hammerberg. I'm with the Maryland Department of the Environment in the Solid Waste Program in the Land and Materials Administration, and I'm here today to support the bill that has been proposed. And I'm available for any questions.
Okay. Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to the panel for your presentation. MedChi has submitted a letter of opposition with some fairly specific questions about plans to address a worst-case scenario. Have safer alternatives to incineration been considered? I don't know if you've seen it, but if you have, could you address their concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have had a chance to review the letter, and I can say without a doubt that all of their questions and concerns are addressed during the research, development, and demonstration permit application process that we are trying to make ourselves availed to us. For instance, they talk about risks of a release in a worst-case scenario as part of the permitting process. We, and as well as Army internal safety, we run what we call maximum credible event scenarios and determine where the point of maximum impact would be. And in no way, shape, or form do we do any operation where that point of impact is off of Aberdeen Proving Grounds. And so that must be local for us to proceed no matter what. In addition, they talk about presenting publicly to residents and the local and state governments. The RD&D permit application process, similar to a RCRA permit, requires public notifications in the newspapers, on the radio stations, on billboards. We also hold public meetings to explain our need for the testing, the amount of material to be tested, the duration of the testing. And these things are very short duration tests. They are kind of the final prove out of a technology before we are allowed to field it to our soldiers or our workforce. They ask about safer alternatives. And yes, we have looked at safer alternatives. The Department of Defense has invested $30+ billion in trying to develop safe alternatives. And at the end of the day, there are certain munition types that just cannot be treated through any other alternative based upon the unique nature of their explosives and their chemical agent payload. And finally, the last question, have appropriate Army officials inform Maryland Department of Health and Environment on incineration plans at APG. That would occur when we have matured a technology to the point that we are ready to do testing. We have several technologies that are in development, but they're in a lower what we call technology readiness level. Once we feel that they are mature enough that we feel that agent testing is warranted, then we would approach these organizations and go through the permitting process I've described.
And if I can as well, there should be a letter in the file as well from the Department of Health. It's an informational letter, but they are aware as well of the bill and have not expressed any concerns on the bill.
Okay, thank you very much.
Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't know where to begin, but let me at least, you said these are tests that need to be done before the weapon or before the materials can be deployed for our troops to use. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if they're not safe for our troops to use, why are we going to test them near our population of civilians who live near Aberdeen Proving Ground?
They will be safe for our troops to use. And so the analogy I would use, ma'am, is a rifle. We don't send our soldiers out into the field with a rifle that hasn't been developed, tested, and proven safe and effective for its design purpose. We're looking to do the same thing with technologies that destroy chemical weapons so that we can safely enable our troops and the warfighter to do these operations in the field.
Well, I would like to ask the Department of the Environment, because this legislation actually curtails your authority in the area that the department was created to protect the environment. So why would you want to give up your authority?
I don't know that it does curtail our authority. We still have permitting authority over, and actually, with the technical amendment to the bill, it emphasizes our authority to regulate these materials as hazardous waste and to apply hazardous waste permitting standards to management of them.
Okay. The fiscal note analysis says that it curtails your authority so in this area. So I was wondering, we'll talk offline about that. I have a serious concern about that because, I mean, you're the agency that's supposed to protect the community from environmental hazards, right?
Yeah, if I may, I believe that statement was because of the way the bill made it as introduced. There was a small change, a glitch that would have restricted our authority. With the technical amendment, that glitch has been removed, and our authority has been
Okay,
reasserted.
that doesn't seem like a technicality to me, but thank you so much, and I'll yield to my other colleagues.
Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first of all, just I hope a quick question. What is a thermal treatment technology? Can you explain that to me?
It runs the gamut, and what it is a technology that uses high temperature heat to destroy both the chemical weapon, the chemical agent, and the explosives normally that are attached to that chemical weapon. So when we destroyed the stockpile here at Aberdeen, when we destroyed the Syrian stockpile that Syria declared back in 2013, we were able to use a different technology called neutralization. It works very well when we have large containers of what we call bulk agent that don't have explosives associated with them. But both the United States and our adversaries have historically put chemical agent in things like projectiles, mortars, bomblets, rockets, and it's when you mix the chemical agent with an explosive system that we need these thermal technologies to destroy those weapons. That neutralization is just not effective. We invested quite a bit of money at the plants at both Pueblo, Colorado and Bluegrass, Kentucky, trying to make those systems work. And at the end of the day, several incinerators were needed to be permitted at both of those sites to finish up their stockpiles.
Thank you. And is there discharge from this process either into the air or into the groundwater?
So it depends on the specific system. So the systems that we would use to destroy, say, a North Korean stockpile have a very robust pollution abatement system that goes with it that scrubs all the contaminants from and the byproducts out of the air from destroying it. The final step of any treatment process that we do is it goes through a carbon filter system. Some of the technologies we were developing for the warfighter to use in the field, when they use those systems in the field, may not have that chemical scrubber system on it, but when we test them here at Aberdeen, we'll have those layers of protection to include explosive-proof rooms stacked on top of each other, and a ventilation system that ensures the gas flows through those carbon filter systems and scrubs out all the contaminants prior to discharge.
Okay.
So that one pager that I think is in the file shows a graphic representation of what I'm talking about, and far more elegant than what I'm saying.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask a question of MDE, if that's okay. Thank you. So I want to follow up on Delegate Healy's questions. And so if I understand right, if this bill were to pass, there would still be a permitting process with MDE to be able to do this?
Yes, that's correct. We would still have authority for permitting.
You would have authority for permit, but will there be a permitting process?
Yeah, they would be required to comply with permit requirements.
Thank you. And how will MDE continue to exercise oversight to make sure that the processes are safe and not harming our waters or our air?
Well, we have the ability to enter any permitted facility with our inspectors, and those can be unannounced inspections, and we will inspect to verify compliance, determine if there are any issues. Also, the permits will typically have reporting requirements in which we are required to receive any reports of process upsets or incidents, or just general reports on the routine operations of the facility.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, you mentioned that in passing in your comments to Delegate Ruth that there were two other sites. You cited Colorado and the Bluegrass Army Depot, which used to be my old stomping ground down there in Kentucky. But anyway, and so my question is, do they have this kind of waiver at those plants, at those proving grounds?
They are operating long-term systems because they were destroying the stockpile that were located at those sites.
So what's the answer? Did they get the waiver that you're seeking here?
They had to apply for a RCRA permit, a full RCRA operational permit, which is ours. Our D&D permits are very short-term operations. RCRA permits are long-term operations. They are more rigorous than what we're talking about because they are longer-term sustained operations for years.
So the answer is they don't have the same, like they don't have what you're seeking here.
They never had the limitations that were in Maryland.
Okay. And what is the population, as a follow-up on that, what's the population density around those facilities? Are those the only two facilities? Other two facilities, or are there more around the country?
There were 9 original stockpiles of chemical weapons stored in the United States.
There were. Are there still 9?
All of them are destroyed now.
All of them.
All of the U.S. stockpile of chemical weapons are destroyed.
Okay.
That was completed in 2023.
All right. And what's the population density around those two sites?
It varies. The very first site that I actually worked on is 800-mile, 1 square mile island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Johnson Atoll. Right? Nobody for 800 miles. The population around Bluegrass, Kentucky, there is an elementary school less than 1.5 miles from the treatment facility.
Yeah, I know. If I could, Mr. Chair, I have a follow-up question to Delegate Stein's question about the MedChi list. You ticked off a list of things that you cited procedures require you to do. Where are those procedures? Are those in federal law, or what are those procedures you were citing?
Ed, do you want to address where the RD&D permitting requirements?
Well, the requirements for research, development, and demonstration permits are in COMAR, Code of Maryland Regulations 26.13.07.19, I believe it is. And those mirror federal requirements in 40.
Okay, but they're in Maryland law?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Yeah, we have an authorized program where we're delegated authority to be the primary implementer for hazard.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Full disclosure, I'm the former president of Southern Maryland Navy Alliance, and I remember when you guys set yourself up a number of years ago following our model when Monmouth and folks moved up to Aberdeen. I'll make sure we're really clear. All this work is done aboard base, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And at the same time, you are not disposing of excess materials. You're only disposing of what you have currently on base.
Yes, and oftentimes we actually have to make the material to
replicate,
to prove the systems. You have to replicate.
Thank you. Since this is an issue of national security, what is the effect if this law were not able to be put into effect?
I can speak. So right now for the warfighter, I'll break it up into 2 parts. For the warfighter, right now the only solution that they have available to them in the field is to put significant quantities of explosives on an item, put it out in the middle of an open field and blow it up.
And hope that there's no replication of anything going into the air.
Hope that they've configured those explosives correctly so that the agent is consumed in the fireball, yes. We're trying to give them more elegant solutions than that.
So if I think back to World War I, we had mustard gas and things like that, which was a very toxic chemical. We have other toxic chemicals out there. What we're trying to simply do here is find a way to dispose or find a way to dispose of other agents, other nations' chemicals that are out there now in a safe and reliable manner that not only protects our warfighters, but simultaneously will be in such a manner that will protect the citizens of the state of Maryland.
That's correct, sir.
Thank you.
Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for coming. You mentioned the 9 chemical weapon stockpiles in the United States. Was one of those in Anniston, Alabama?
Yes, it was.
Did any of you guys have any experience with that one?
I didn't work at that site directly, but I worked on its sister sites.
Got it. Yeah, I have a little bit of experience with that one because I grew up right next to it. We were taught, as 9 or 10-year-olds, the different sounds, when there would be leaks. And honestly, we were kind of freaked out because they told us about all the worst case scenarios as little children of what would happen if something went wrong at the incinerator. We were all given basically escape plans. My own gym in my school had to be sealed off because it was one of the places in the town that we would have to go to if there was a massive leak. And I will say, to this day, I think one of the federal agencies considers Anniston, Alabama, the most toxic and contaminated place in the United States, not solely because of the Anniston chemical activity, but also because of Monsanto. My question is, do you guys know if any particulate matter or air emissions were produced by the destruction of the chemical weapons, the incineration of the chemical weapons in Anniston? In other words, were me and my family and my neighbors, were we breathing particulate matter or dioxins or any other harmful air emissions during the time when those weapons were incinerated?
So I can tell you that at the start of each munition campaign and every new agent type at that facility, there was a trial burn performed where they would assess every airborne hazardous constituent during a series of tests and sample and analyze them throughout the test. They would then model that through what's called a health risk assessment that looks at both human health and ecological health. And time again, every single one of those tests proved that the treatment of those chemical agents was well below the air emission standards set for human health and ecological risk protocols.
Okay, so, but I mean, I know that the cancer rates are higher, are one of the highest in the nation. So can you say definitively that we didn't breathe anything bad, is my question. I mean, can you say definitively that it is likely that there were no harmful emissions that citizens of Anniston or near any of the other 8 incinerators breathed?
I mean, it's not really a parallel to what we're talking about today.
Well, that's what I'm going to get to. That's what I'm going to. I know. I'm just talking about those right now.
Yeah, I cannot.
Okay. And so that's my final question: is how does what happened in Anniston and some of the other relatively densely populated places where these chemical weapons were burned in the 90s and 2000s, where I do think that there are genuinely a lot of questions still out there about the effects that those communities face. How is that different or similar to what is being proposed in this bill at Aberdeen?
All I can tell you is that, so Anniston was one of 7 sites that used, 5 sites that used incineration technology. They all had to do that same trial burn process to include the risk assessments that are required by both state and federal EPA. And every single time, those facilities passed the emission standards and showed that there would be no health effect on the local population.
And that's what would happen here too, is what you're saying? I mean, how is that similar?
So we're in a different situation now because now we're proving technologies out and we're not running sustained operations. Our test operations may only last a matter of minutes or hours or days, but not longer than weeks, because all we're doing is that final prove out of the technology before it becomes operational. And that's all done in test chambers that have those same very robust cascade ventilation systems that filter everything through carbon filter systems that have been specifically designed to treat and clean the airstream coming out of these tests.
Okay, last question. I think you covered this, and I think I may have missed it, and I know this is like my third last question. Is MDE or any other state agency monitoring the air emissions during this process?
MDE.
Well, what we would be looking at would be the filtration system. They are typically—
To make sure it's working okay.
Then typically they're a multi-stage filtration system where there will be monitoring between banks of these filters, so that if there's breakthrough through the first set of filters, that's detected and then the system is shut down. So there's redundancy built into the system. So
you're making sure that the systems look okay, you're evaluating those, but you're not necessarily doing ongoing air quality assessments as an agency, is that right?
But there's continuous monitoring of any emissions just to detect whether any agent has come out, and then that alarms typically, and then that shuts down the things. I think Rob can probably talk about it.
That's correct. We have monitoring points both in the workspace, the inlets to those air filter systems, in between the beds of carbon, so that we know well in advance that we have an issue and to shut down the system. So we're never reliant on the last monitor that's monitoring the discharge. We're relying on the monitors that are upstream of that to make sure we can do safe shutdown well in advance of any issues.
Got it. Okay. Thanks very much again.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to go back to Delegate Stewart's questions to the point of Alabama. Is it fair to say that the incineration and the emissions is different than it would be now? So in other words, what would have been acceptable air quality or emissions in Alabama at that time when one of the stockpiles were there are different than they are now?
That stockpile destruction went all the way up through, I want to say, 2008 and 9. Their air emission standards are still fairly similar. And the gentleman talked about, the vast majority of the issues down in Alabama is there was a big Monsanto chemical manufacturing
Yeah,
plant down there.
I'm going to move
made
away from that. That's
PCBs
not what I'm asking. I'm asking about air quality emissions right there. You're saying they're really the same. Are you going to look to kind of reduce and have maybe the standard is one way, but you're going to look to potentially exceed the standard? I mean, if you're saying that they're same standards from Alabama from 2008 to now.
We would be required to use today's standards no matter what. That's absolute.
Okay, and again, the incineration process from that time to now is very different?
Yes.
Okay. And then the last question is what happens to the residuals? What do you do with the residuals of after you've incinerated all this stuff? Where does this go?
All of that is analyzed. It has to be cleared. We have waste disposal levels that we need to achieve before we can send anything off-site. For solid waste management, anything that's agent contaminated typically gets treated down at a facility down in Port Arthur, Texas. Anything else that doesn't have any agent contamination can go to standard other facilities.
So it's treated and then potentially, hopefully neutralized and then put like in a landfill, or is it?
There's various techniques. Sometimes it's landfilled, sometimes it goes to an incinerator down in Texas.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Ruth, take two.
Thank you for the second bite at the apple, Mr. Chair. So I did find the graphic you were talking about that shows the process with the concrete walls and the air filters. And I see it has a pre-filter, HEPA filter, and a carbon filter. As far as I know, none of those are effective at filtering out PFAS chemicals. And I just wondered, are there a potential for PFAS chemicals in this process? And is anything in place to prevent those from being released? And also, is there any monitoring for PFAS chemicals?
We don't deal with any PFAS compounds as part of ours. There's never been a chemical, they would never be an effective chemical agent, to be honest with you. They don't kill people fast enough. Nor are they breakdown products from our destruction. So they're not formed when you destroy chemical agents. Chemical agents break down into completely other simpler compounds.
Thank you. But I understand that they're not chemical agents, but sometimes PFAS is used to make like an emulsifier, or to make something work better by not breaking down when it's used, or whatever. And so I just, wondered if that's any possibility that.
The value of there not being a stockpile anymore is that we have to make the chemical agent for our testing purposes, so our manufacturing process doesn't allow for it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Delegate Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. If you were to receive an unfavorable vote from the delegation or the committee here, what would your next move be?
Right now, we would be very limited. I mean, we don't have other technologies to give to the warfighter to deal with these things. I talked about open detonation. Right now, that's the only thing they have available to them. When it comes to dealing with projectiles, mortars, submunitions, and bomblets, rockets, there is no other technology that will be effective for their use.
So you couldn't move your operation or what you really need to do to another part of the country?
We cannot. Under the International Chemical Weapons Convention, the United States, each country gets to designate one place in their country where they can operate what's called a single small-scale facility, where they can store and manufacture up to 1 metric ton of chemical agent for defense research purposes. Edgewood has been that place for the United States since 1997, because we're the center of excellence for chem bio research. And so to do this operation somewhere else would mean that we're now shipping chemical agent from the state of Maryland across state lines to that other state for this testing, something that we deem to be far too hazardous to engage in.
Thank you.
Okay, I do not see any additional questions. Oh, we good? Okay, I don't see any additional questions for this panel, so thank you all very much. We have an unfavorable witness, Gwen Dubois from the Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Well, I have 2 minutes to deal with all this. You can see all my testimony. I'm a physician also trained in public health and President of Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility. We deal with really existential public health threats, including nuclear weapons, climate crisis, and pollutants. And we try to have this motto in what we do, and that is you must prevent what you cannot cure. So when we looked at this bill, it exempts the Maryland Department of the Environment from oversight, and they said there's a small technical amendment. I don't know what that small technical amendment was, but it exempts research, and that's if the Department of Defense calls this research. Then they're exempted from federal and state toxic pollution standards from achieving an efficacy over 99%. And Delegate Stewart, if they can't have an efficacy that's high, then some of that stuff is going to be incinerated. And if it's very fine particulate matter, people are going to inhale it. You can't scrub everything. And I'll keep going, but I just want to aside, I hope you caught that the Aberdeen Proving Ground did not incinerate. People fought against incineration with removing the chemicals for the Chemical Weapon Warfare Convention, and they were successful. And a national panel said, that's okay, you can neutralize. The Syrian chemical weapons were neutralized off near in the sea, and that was done successfully. So Aberdeen did not do incineration thanks to people organizing in Harford County, Kent County, elsewhere, and then getting approval nationally. So they don't have experience with doing this. Let me go back to what else they're exempted from. Considering safer alternatives, that's what they did in the 90s. Monitoring data regularly, continuously. If they're not monitoring data, how do we know how safe it is? Specifying the quantity of material, that's not, they don't have to specify, and there's no sunset date on this. Should we give to the Department of Defense now under new leadership and companies, private companies that are contracted with the Department of Defense, authority to protect Marylanders if we cede that authority here with the Maryland Department of the Environment and our legislative bills that we've had in the past?
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you again. That concludes the bill hearing on HB 62. We'll now turn to HB 25 from the Department of Environment, Reservoir Augmentation Permit Establishments. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Alex Butler, representing the Maryland Department of the Environment, here to introduce House Bill 25, Reservoir Augmentation, also known as Indirect Potable Reuse. House Bill 25 builds on the successful pilot program approved in 2023 for the city of Westminster. The basic concept here is treating wastewater to drinking standards, holding it in a reservoir, and then treating it again to drinking water standards for eventual consumption. Maryland is a mostly water-rich state, but in areas where it is not, we need to look to other methods to be sure of that water supply. This process has worked in several other states for many years, and since 2023, we've been developing a pilot project here. That sunsets in 2028. We would like to graduate that to a permanent one. There are a few small technical amendments in your packet, just ensuring that we're referencing the exact right terms. And with me today is Greg Bush to provide some more context.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on House Bill 25. My name is Greg Bush. I'm the program manager for the water supply program at MDE. I'd like to talk about why Maryland needs a water reuse bill. Historically, Maryland has been a water-rich state, and while this continues to be true, the challenges of climate change and population growth have created localized water constraints. We've seen regional droughts over the past 2 summers in areas where supplies of drinking water fall short of planned need. The city of Westminster specifically is looking toward potable reuse as one tool to manage these challenges. House Bill 25 establishes the Reservoir Augmentation Program, allowing safe and well-regulated use of reclaimed water, treated to drinking water standards to supplement our drinking water sources. This builds on our successful, innovative potable reuse program, which has already demonstrated feasibility and safety. Reservoir augmentation will benefit the environment and the economy of Maryland. By reducing the withdrawal of natural water sources, we lessen demand on rivers and groundwater. This can be especially important during drought when stream ecosystems are already stressed. Additionally, communities with limited water supplies would have a sustainable option to support future growth and economic development. The technology behind water reuse is not new, it's well established. States like California and Texas have used water reuse successfully for decades, and countries around the world rely on similar systems to ensure their water security. If you've traveled around the country, you've probably already consumed reclaimed water without even knowing it. This bill is forward-thinking, science-based solution that helps take an incremental step toward enhancing Maryland's water resiliency. In areas with a demonstrated need, with proper regulatory oversight and rigorous treatment standards, we can ensure the reservoir augmentation is a safe and effective option. For these reasons, I ask the committee to issue a favorable report on House Bill 25. Thank you.
Excellent timing. Any questions for MDE on this bill? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the bill hearing HB 25. We'll now turn to HB 40, Natural Resources, Fishing Licenses and Stamps Alterations. Bring up the department. Ellen. Go ahead when you're ready.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, my name is Dylan Baylor, and I'm the Legislative Director at the Department of Natural Resources. I'm here testifying in support of House Bill 40, Natural Resources, Fishing Licenses and Stamps Alterations. Also joining me behind me is the leadership of our Fisheries and Boating Service and our Fiscal and Administrative Services, in case there's questions that I am unable to answer. This legislation would provide targeted increases to some of the department's recreational fishing licenses, of which the Trout Stamp and Senior Consolidated License have not seen adjustments since 1992, and the others since 2007. 2 years ago, the department had the opportunity to host you all on this committee at Rocky Gap State Park to review a variety of the department's responsibilities. A part of that tour was a conversation around our freshwater fisheries and hatcheries division through a boat ride and a review of their work on Lake Habib. As each of you saw, the division is a dedicated team of passionate professionals, managers, biologists, and fish culturalists who in their professional capacities ensure the long-term sustainable use of our fisheries resources so that recreational, ecological, social, and/or economic benefits can be sustainably realized for both residents and visitors. Their work includes research, population surveys, habitat and water quality assessments, education and outreach, and expanding fishing access. But more specifically, our freshwater fisheries programs include our brook trout program, helping restore Maryland's only native salmonid, our invasive fishes program, which helps control the introduction and spread of invasive species, and our youth fishing program, to name a few. Our fishing license and stamps fund this mission. Our non-title license sale revenues are deposited into the Fisheries Management and Protection Fund, and that revenue, like a majority of the department's fund sources, is based on the idea of user pay, user benefit, in which the funds collected from our user groups go back into ensuring that those user groups and the resources that they utilize are supported. This user group is comprised of over 130,000 adult anglers representing all jurisdictions across the state. Furthermore, based on a 2015 survey, freshwater fishing expenditures contribute roughly $400 million to the state's economy. We are proud of the investment that this work brings into the state, and we are proud to continue to serve Marylanders through this work. But the reason for this legislation is because of the fiscal situation of these related funds. Unfortunately, because these fees have not been adjusted in quite some time, our fund levels are projected to be depleted by fiscal year 27. In response to this crisis, the department brought together a work group consisting of our advisory bodies to work on recommending fair and reasonable fees to allow us to continue our work. That is how we got the legislation here today. This proposed legislation would allow the department to remain solvent, to ensure that we can continue to do our work across the state and invest in our critical infrastructure needs, such as our aging hatcheries, and invest in our invasive fishes program with a specific focus on species like the blue catfish, or now known as the Chesapeake chana. And with this legislation, we will also ensure that Maryland remains a nationwide destination for inland sport fishing for Marylanders and visitors alike. Once again, I would respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 40, and after my panel, we'll be happy to answer any questions, either myself or the technical staff behind us. So thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, you can go.
Okay. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Emily Mendenhall. I am a resident of Baltimore City, not necessarily known as a fishing destination, but maybe that's especially important why I'm here. I'm here to speak as a resident and citizen of Maryland, a multi-year license holder of the MDNR non-tidal fisheries and trout stamps, and as an active beneficiary of the work from the MDNR that the funds raised by these licenses enable. We understand that our support of this bill and its sister bill in the Senate means that we and the other anglers, not fishermen, anglers, recreating in Maryland's non-tidal waters will be paying more for the licenses to do so. And we're fully in support of that increase and believe that our fellow anglers and potential anglers who benefit from the multitude of services these licenses pay for should be and will be also. We all would certainly feel the loss if we decided not to support this bill and lost these services in our state. Marylanders and visiting anglers alike benefit from the MDNR's efforts in environmental review, research, population surveys, water quality assessment, management control of invasive species, population restoration, technical guidance, education and research, and fishing access maintenance. It's this work that provides for the continued health of our non-tidal waterways and their surrounding ecosystems and allows us to fish there. Up to this point, it's frankly impressive that we've continued to receive such quality benefits from the MDNR team on the budget of licenses that have not been adjusted for continuous needs and inflation for over 18 years in terms of the license and 33 years in terms of the trout stamp. And that is correct. The MD license holders have not seen an increase in the cost of licenses since 2007 and 1992, respectively. The cost of this work have, like the cost of everything in our lives, increased over the last 33 years. And in order for us to continue to receive the services throughout our non-tidal fisheries, we need to properly fund them with licenses priced adequately. Is it okay if I continue? I just have a little bit more.
That's your 2 minutes. Next witness, please go ahead. Next witness, please go ahead. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Corbin and Vice Chair Boyce and committee members. I'm Roger Tragesser. I'm going to come at this from a slightly more personal standpoint because I've kind of been associated with the Fisheries Department for a while. Not as a worker, just as a citizen. I'm a former president and current region director in the Maryland Bass Nation, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of and support House Bill 40. Maryland Bass Nation is comprised of approximately 400 anglers with a passion for fishing for black bass, both largemouth and smallmouth in the state of Maryland. Black bass are the most sought after game fish in our state, and maintaining the quality of our nationally recognized top fisheries is a priority that comes at a price. In 2009, I was strongly encouraged by a trout angler, Mr. James Gracie, to become more involved with Fisheries Department. So I submitted a resume and was appointed to the Sport Fish Advisory Commission. I'm still on that commission, with the hope of giving black bass a more recognized position within fisheries. That recognition came about to the point where we've established a Black Bass Advisory Committee that reports back to Sportfish. The 16-year relationship that I have had with the department has given me an opportunity that most anglers do not have in observing the dedication, determination of the individuals demonstrate to me they attempt to deliver the best product possible. When the department was looking for volunteers to sit on a work group recommending cost changes to the current license fee, I didn't hesitate for a second. I wanted and needed to be involved to offer what advice I could, but to also become a conduit of information to my fellow anglers regarding the need for these fee adjustments. I'll never convince all of them, but most have been very receptive to this need.
Great. Thank you, sir. I know 2 minutes flies by. Next witness, please.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Randy Dwyer. I reside in the 22nd District in Maryland, and then I'm represented by delegates Ashanti Martinez, Nicole Williams, and Delegate Healy here. I'd like to recognize Delegate Healy for her hard work on this committee and to each of the delegates representing the communities of the 22nd District. I also serve as chair of the Mid-Atlantic Council of Trout Unlimited. I also hold a seat on the Coldwater Fisheries Advisory Committee to DNR and speak to you today as the chair of the Mid-Atlantic Council. The MAC, as we call it, is a conservation organization comprised of multiple local TU chapters across Maryland. This includes Maryland TU, Patapsco Valley TU, Potomac-Patuxent TU, located in eastern, southern, and central Maryland, Seneca Valley TU, National Capital TU in central and northern Maryland, and Youghiogheny TU chapter, which is out in western Maryland Panhandle. Taken together, our chapters represent over 4,000 Trout Unlimited members across the state. These members are avid outdoorsmen and women who come to get from every walk of life. They volunteer thousands of hours annually in their communities, work on conservation projects along our ocean shoreline, in the Chesapeake Bay, on the Potomac River, and our Coldwater rivers and streams across the state. At the most recent Board of Directors meeting, the Mid-Atlantic Council of Trout Unlimited reviewed and discussed the proposed license fee increases found in HB 40 and voted unanimously to support the proposed fees increases. The non-tidal fishing license fees have not been increased, as Emily said earlier, since 2007, and the trout stamp has not been increased since 1992, 32 years ago. What does that mean for me personally? As a recent retiree, I've been paying $5 annually for the last several years. But with the proposed fee increases, my future annual fees will be a $12 annual license plus a $20 trout stamp for a total annual fee of $32. That's from what I'm paying right now is $5. Freshwater Fisheries and Hatcheries Division in a strong operational position. Thank you, and we strongly support this bill and ask that you vote it out of committee and before the full House of Delegates.
Thank you so much. We have a favorable virtual witness, David Sikorsky. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Hello, my name is David Sikorsky, and I'm the Executive Director of Coastal Conservation Association Maryland, which is a grassroots organization of recreational anglers, which are largely focused on tidal waters. And so I've spoken in front of this committee quite a few times around issues like oysters, striped bass, and the like. I also have the honor of representing Delegate Stein on the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission to help work with our sister states up and down the coast to find solutions to manage our collectively shared resources. Since 2009, like Mr. Trageser, I served on the Sport Fisheries Advisory Commission, was fortunate enough to serve as vice chair and also chair, and I recently resigned in 2024 just to provide opportunity for another Maryland angler to advise the department through that commission, because I am honored to work every day on behalf of Maryland anglers. So I've had a long history of working with the department, first as a volunteer for my organization, and now as a full-time employee since 2017. And every step of the way, I found the people of the department to be dedicated to their mission. And I think that everything the panel has said so far is just completely spot on to the dedication and the value that the Inland Fisheries Division and all divisions of DNR bring to the people. I want to highlight a couple pieces, one of which is environmental review. Mr. Baylor mentioned it, and it's extremely important that DNR has the capacity to play that role to support their sister agencies to make sure our waterways are taken care of. Trout, which are so vital to our state, have lost so much over history, and it's very important that we protect what is left, as Mr. Dwyer stated. Bass are available in every single district in this state, and I've got a great story about a district bordering mine. I live right inside Baltimore City on Falls Road, and I love to go recreate at Lake Roland, which is a joint partnership between Baltimore County and Baltimore City, and a place where many people can recreate. When COVID hit, unfortunately, trout could not be placed there, but by working with Mr. Tony Prochaska, who I see in the crowd, and his team in the Inland Fisheries Division, in the last couple of years, we've been able to electrosurvey that lake, look to see how we can improve it for anglers in Maryland, and release 4,000 largemouth bass, which will provide future fishing activities. That's the kind of department that I want to support, and that's why I asked for a favorable report on HB 40. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Delegate Jacobs.
Just one little clarification. It appears though the tidal fish license is only the senior license. Is that correct? That has an increase.
Are you asking about non-tidal or tidal?
No, I'm asking in this new range of increases, the only tidal increase is in the senior sport fishing license, from 5 to 12, is that correct?
So good afternoon. I'm Tony Prochaska, Maryland Department of Natural Resources, Fishing and Boating Services. The senior consolidated license allows anglers, senior anglers, to fish in tidal and non-tidal waters. So the revenue that's earned from the sale of those licenses is split between the management in tidal waters and non-tidal waters.
Yeah, I see where it's a 50%.
That's correct. It's
50%
50-50.
split
That's
on,
correct.
between FMPF and
Yeah,
FRD.
fisheries management, protection, and
Right.
fisheries research
So-
and development.
So my question again is, this is the only one of the licenses that are being affected by the increase that has to do with title?
That is correct.
Is only the seniors?
That's correct.
So it's not the under 65?
No, that's all for non-tidal waters.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you all. We do have an unfavorable witness virtually, Francis Alessantrino. If you're there.
Yes.
Please go ahead when you're ready.
Representatives, thank you for hearing from me today. Please vote no on House Bill 40. In its current state, the bill poses an undue and discriminatory effect on Maryland senior citizens. By raising the fee for resident consolidated senior sport fishing license and requiring a resident senior to obtain a trout stamp, a Maryland senior resident is burdened by a 540% increase in cost. This is more than any other fee increase proposed by the bill. This bill commits a discriminatory act by imposing an unjustifiable cost increase for the resident consolidated senior sport fishing license. Please do not alter the fee for the resident consolidated senior sport fishing license. Maryland resident sport fishers have maintained a lifelong commitment to conservation and support of Maryland natural resources. Most seniors have paid license fees their entire life. A reduced senior cost is earned. It is not uncommon for senior citizens as grandparents to introduce the young generation to Maryland fishing and conservation, thus ensuring continued support from future generations. Please do not penalize us with increased cost. The majority of the members of the Environmental Subcommittee and the Natural Resources, Agriculture, and Open Space Committee are or soon will be senior citizens. This bill could generate ample funds for the Department of Natural Resources without discriminating against Maryland senior citizens. If the bill were proposed without an increase to the resident consolidated senior sport fishing license, the bill provides a 56% increase in resident annual fishing license fees, a 113% increase in resident 7 consecutive day fishing license fees, a 300% increase in the resident trout stamp fees, and an 80% increase in non-resident annual fishing license, and a 329% increase in non-resident 7-day consecutive fishing license, and a 200% increase in non-resident trout stamp fees. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? Okay, thank you, sir, for joining us, and I believe that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 40. We will now turn to House Bill 42. Vice Chair Boyce, Solid Waste Disposal Surcharge and Wasted Food Reduction and Diversion Fund and Grant Programs established.
Sorry, that's a mouthful. Can I bring up my panel, 2 of which I think are online, Mr. Chair? Somebody left their glasses. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, I am Regina T. Boyce, representing HB 42, Solid Waste Disposal Surcharge and Wasted Food Reduction and Diversion Fund and Grant Programs established. Yes, it's a long title. This bill has been presented in prior years, since this is the third year for this particular bill, with a couple of changes. HB 42 establishes 3 grant programs. 1, Wasted Food Reduction and Diversion Grant Program, which targets infrastructure, education, technical assistance to reduce wasted food, rescue edible food, compost or recycling food residuals, and moves away from single-use food service where, which will be, the Department of Agriculture will oversee this grant program. On-farm organics diversion and recycling grant program targets funds for farmers for wasted food reduction and organics diversion via cold storage, food rescue, composting, compost use, and more projects to build up implementation, overseen by the Department of the Environment. And then the third, which is the new part of the bill this year, is the County Wasted Food Reduction Block Grant. This targets all counties. Counties will receive funding in proportion to population to reduce, rescue, and divert food waste. They will receive 50% of the grant funds. The programs are administered, of course, by the Department of Agriculture and the Department of the Environment. The bill's main purpose is, one, to fill gaps in state programming around organic waste, composting, and food waste reduction, and two, create the infrastructure needed to bolster organic waste diversion. The bill establishes a solid waste disposal surcharge for $2 a ton of solid waste processed by a refuse disposal system for final disposal, establishing the Wasted Food Reduction and Diversion Grant Program in the Department of the Environment. This bill helps to reduce solid waste processed annually, would provide proper funding for recycling programs, especially for on-farm organic recycling, and will also help prevent food waste across the state of Maryland. More than 42 million tons of food scraps are landfilled or incinerated in the U.S. each year, as estimated by the EPA. Lack of funding to prevent and recycle wasted food are one of the main reasons for such high tonnage. According to an analysis by REFED, an established annual investment of $18.6 billion can reduce food waste by 21.4 million tons each year. This investment could cut greenhouse gas emissions, save water, and rescue edible food for those in need. 8 states across the country have surcharges and waste diversion policies, including grants for recycling. These include New Jersey at $3 a ton, Pennsylvania with varying fees, Minnesota at, they have what we call a generator level model, which is 9.75% for households and 17% for commercial. Wisconsin, $13 a ton, North Carolina, $2 a ton, Iowa, $4.25 per ton. Ohio has a varied fee, and Indiana is 50 cents per ton. Each of these states applies their surcharge to landfills, half apply to surcharge to incinerators, and half apply to transfer station. And as I mentioned, Minnesota is a generator level model. Additionally, counties in states such as California, Arizona, Illinois, Michigan, Mississippi, Colorado, and West Virginia have similar programs focused on general waste production. Examples of funding use include environmental programs such as hazardous site cleanups, watershed restoration, landfill cleanups, environmental monitoring, and carbon farming planning as examples. International food waste diversion programs include the World Food Program, a UN agency that provides food assistance in emergencies and works with communities to improve nutrition. The United Nations International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste Reduction, and programs in the United Kingdom and the United States, such as Love Food Hate Waste, a program in the UK that teaches consumers how to reduce their food waste through recipe portioning and planning. And given that the federal government has pulled a couple of grants, the U.S. Department of the EPA has already established a solid waste reduction and recycling grant program throughout the nation. The Solid Waste Infrastructure for Recycling Program provides grants to implement the National Recycling Strategy to improve post-consumer materials management and infrastructure, support improvements to local post-consumer materials management and recycling programs. HB 42 supports small businesses and local communities by granting funds to businesses, preventing and rescuing wasted food and recycling materials. The bill also prioritizes funding for projects serving overburdened and underserved communities and will allow opportunities for partnership between nonprofits. But the proposed surcharge is collected by owners or operators who collect disposal charge at their facility and submit the collected surcharge to the state. The surcharge is not applicable to materials recycled, composted, or otherwise diverted from final disposal. An example of such program in Maryland that is funded by a surcharge and address sustainable solution is the Empower Maryland, established by the General Assembly in 2008, is a comprehensive energy efficiency initiative aimed at reducing energy consumption, promoting efficiency, and advancing conservation efforts statewide. It is funded in part by surcharges on gas bills paid by consumers, which contribute to financing various energy efficiency and conservation programs. The initiative's objective is to enhance sustainability and lower energy costs for consumers through the promotion of efficient energy practices and technologies. I'd like to take this opportunity, Mr. Chair and colleagues, to acknowledge opposition to the bill's surcharge. While the bill's concept is supported, the surcharge is not, and here are a couple of the concerns. Waste management businesses, both public and private, are not polluters. We acknowledge that. People are. We understand that this is and is not blaming waste management companies or haulers. This is not a polluter's pay model, but rather a final disposal method used by other states. We are willing to work through the surcharge. We also understand that the states that use a generator level or a final disposal level method have had these methods in place for decades. The earliest is in 1984 in Santa Clara, California, and the most recent is New Jersey and North Carolina in 2008. We also take seriously the opposition's concern for what they believe is a potential impact of this legislation on businesses. Costs for everyone will rise in their position, and given the budget deficits in the federal administration, I understand that they believe that this is not a good time for such a bill. Finally, we also have heard from Prince George's County Organics Waste Facility, for which we are working with them on solutions, as they currently collect curbside organic waste from a little over 180,000 residential homes. And at this time, they also negotiate a cost every 5 years with their haulers. It is in their budget to do so. So we're, again, happy to work with them. Again, the surcharge funded program is a proven method that has been used in many states across the United States as well as internationally. We also understand, I saw the letter from the Comptroller's office regarding the fee collection and their IT potential issues that they're willing to work through as well, and we're happy to work with them. We certainly look forward to the continued conversation and the path forward to the solution that accepts this program as acceptable, but looking for a funding stream for it. I thank the committee for their time and the consideration for HB 42. Thank you. And the next two individuals should be virtual, Mr. Chair.
Great. We have Sophia Jones for the Institute for Self-Reliance. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Hello, members of the committee. My name is Sophia Jones. I work on policies to advance composting at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. We've worked closely with Vice Chair Boyce and many stakeholders over the past 4 years to craft a bill that is implementable within Maryland. During this time, I've researched the other states that have this type of mechanism, integrating the lessons learned and best practices into this bill. Happy to answer any questions regarding this bill as well. House Bill 42 establishes a consistent source of funding that isn't dependent on appropriations or federal funding, covers administrative costs as well. It will support our local governments, schools, farmers, nonprofits, and businesses in decreasing the wasted food going to landfills. This model is already successful in at least 10 other states. Just to highlight 2 examples of the benefits they experience, since 2008, Indiana's grant program has created over 1,000 jobs and diverted over 1.5 million tons of materials annually. In North Carolina, just under $1 million in grant funding resulted in 45 new jobs created, 8 million additional tons recycled, and 55,000 tons of organic material diverted. Imagine what $14 million annually will achieve in Maryland. More jobs in state, less material wasted, saved landfill space, infrastructure, and education. My written testimony submitted on behalf of ILSR has 35 organizations signed on to it. They represent a wide variety of sectors, and all of them recognize the benefits that this bill's passage would bring to the communities they engage. We know this bill will only benefit Maryland, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chair, there's a number of other virtual witnesses, so why don't you, as usual, tell me what to do here and tell me who you want
The
next.
next person should be Brenda Platt, and then we can move to the individuals here. So,
Sounds great, boss.
thank you.
Brenda Platt, please go ahead.
All right. Dear Chair and members of the committee, I'm Brenda Platt with the nonprofit, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and I'd just like to highlight a few reasons to support this bill. First, landfilling and burning our waste already cost taxpayers in Maryland a boatload of money. Consider that the average American family of 4 spends $1,500 a year on uneaten food. Second, the solid waste management industry is a $91 billion industry, and 5 companies alone control 50% of it. That's a massive transfer of wealth into the pockets of a handful of companies, money that too often actually flows out of state. Republic Industries, which opposes this bill, earned more than $4 billion in its last reported quarter. Third, the solutions are not going to magically appear without investment. Food rescue, transition to reusable utensils over throwaway items, helping farmers compost and use compost. Just consider that moving to reuse alone would save our schools thousands of dollars each year. That's each school. You may hear that the $2 per ton surcharge will hurt taxpayers or businesses or increase waste flowing out of state. I'll just tell you, I think that's false. Rather, this bill encourages Marylanders to stop producing trash, and it supports in-state solutions and options, including for haulers. And the less trash produced, the lower the solid waste disposal fees and the longer our publicly owned landfills remain open. More jobs, many co-benefits. And let me just conclude by saying my last point is that this bill represents exactly what state leaders have articulated is needed in the light of the budget deficit. It is a new revenue-creating policy that keeps our state competitive with the surrounding region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. HB 42 establishes the on-farm, Rachel Jones, Maryland Department of Agriculture, Director of Government Relations. HB 42 establishes the on-farm organics diversion and recycling grant program at MDA, in addition to establishing grant programs at MDE. The program established at MDA would be aimed towards providing grants to eligible entities in order to assist with the costs of developing and implementing on-farm composting and compost use projects, food waste prevention, and food rescue projects. MDA strongly supports this legislation as we have in previous years. On-farm composting is a growing area of interest with farmers and provides both agronomic and economic benefits. We've traveled during the interim Secretary Addicks and our team, we spend time traveling to farms all across the state, in every county and in Baltimore City, and seeing how different operations function. And we've seen some very, very impressive on-farm organic operations, and we'd love to see other farms be able to have the opportunity to do more of that. There's so many benefits to it. Well-managed compost provides a carbon-rich material that can help increase organic matter levels and improve soil health. We've talked a lot about soil health and the various programs we have at MDA. We've talked about nutrient management plans and ensuring that folks are compliant with that. Having the ability to produce your own organic material on farm would really help to progress that goal a lot quicker. Additionally, the grants in the program can enable training, education, and projects to reduce or redistribute food waste to support local communities. So we understand that this would give MDA the ability to expand the services and resources we provide to farmers. And we have lots of experience with cost share programs and helping folks manage grants. And we've got the coordination existing with MDE on various programs like this where we'll share a fund. And so with that, we ask your support. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Stephanie Lansing. I'm a professor at the University of Maryland in Environmental Science and Technology, and I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council, where I serve as the vice chair and lead the Environment and Production Committee. The Food System Resiliency Council wants to state its support of House Bill 42. The 2021 legislative session brought together 32 appointed council members from across the state with different points of entry and expertise to work towards a more resilient food system and address the food insecurity crisis. One of the key mandates of the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council is to develop equity and sustainability policies that increase the long-term resiliency of Maryland's food system. A key recommendation in our 2024 report that was given to all the legislators was recommendation 2.2 was to increase the capacity for diverted organic materials through establishing a grant program using a waste disposal surcharge. The surcharge aligns with established programs in neighboring states and would help reduce waste and increase rescuing and recycling of food in the state. Currently, the state has minimal facilities for food diversion to increase food security or recycle non-recoverable food resources, and funds are needed to build this infrastructure. Increasing food diversion and developing organic recycling will build upon emerging practices that we have in the state, but we really need the resources to create this infrastructure. This will allow us to reduce hunger, to reduce the amount of wasted food through the passage of this bill, which again establishes grant funds without increasing the base state line funding. EPA. Right now, Pennsylvania has a 6.25 surcharge. They established that in 1988. And so we're decades behind our neighboring states. But passing this will help us increase our food system resiliency, and the Food System Resiliency Council is in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ben Parry. I'm the CEO of Compost Crew, testifying in favor of HB 42. We are a Maryland-based business that has been recycling and composting food waste for 14 years. I'd like to speak to the low impact of the surcharge on waste bills, but the very significant impact of the funding for schools and farms and other organizations trying to compost. $2 a ton is a nominal fee that will not have a negative impact on waste haulers and generators. For a normal waste generator, the tipping fee may represent about 20% of total costs. Tipping fees for trash are around $70 to $100 a ton. So a $2 per ton surcharge is just 2 to 3% of the tipping fee and less than 0.5% of total costs. Most trash companies apply a much higher 3 to 5% fuel and environmental charge on their waste bills. So less than 0.5% is not much. Now, to support composting programs, this funding is sorely needed at farms and schools and other organizations. So we provide composting services to about 24 schools in Maryland, which is less than 5% of the total schools in our service territory. About a third of these schools suspended their composting programs due to lack of funding. My son joined a composting club at his high school to support its program, and he told me they're trying to organize a bake sale to raise funding for their composting program. A bake sale. Can you imagine a principal of a school asking students to organize a bake sale or a car wash so that their trash can be picked up on a regular basis? That is mind-boggling and very frustrating. So I encourage a favorable report on this bill. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, we can take questions. I thought MDE was going to be here, but I don't think they are, so.
I do not think they signed
That's
up.
quite all right.
Okay. The Vice Chair says we can take questions. Any questions? Delegate Healy.
Just quickly, I noticed that Prince George's County has some testimony in the if you could, it's information that they presented, but have you had a chance to look at it yet?
I saw it this morning, and we have been in constant conversations with them, as I mentioned, as I was testifying about the fee. The way they do their fee is that they they charge, I think it's per household fee that then goes to them, that they then have a contract with haulers and then pay the haulers afterwards. And so they have come up with a couple of ideas about how, because they do in general support the concept, but because they're already doing it, they don't want to be penalized. So one option is to pull them out of the bill altogether, and that would make them ineligible for any of the county grants or any of the grants, or allow them, I believe, to stay in and then just have, per the money that's taken out when they apply for the county grant, they would just get the money back that they, it's like reimbursable. So we're open to solutions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I just had to do my due diligence
course
for
you
my
did.
local jurisdiction. Thank you.
Such a good representative.
And to our friends on Zoom, you don't need to keep raising your hand. We will call on you when we get to your panel. Delegate Jacobs.
Mr. Chairman, and Rachel, this may be good for you or maybe Madam Vice Chair, I'm not sure, but last year, as you remember, we had quite a discussion on the DAF legislation. And is there any chance that there would be any commingling with this food residuals with any of that DAF?
I didn't hear the question.
So he's asking whether or not last year's bill on food processing residuals, also known as DAF, would coincide with this. So no.
I mean, would it be any commingling in it?
So no, and we had to, when we drafted the regulations in the aftermath of session last year after the bill passed, we had to establish in the regulations that went before the AELR committee here in the body, in the assembly, that food processing residuals known as DAF material are what we were referring to with that bill, and the permits required for hauling and land applying those materials. Organic composting materials are not the same. And so we did have that discussion with a lot of the stakeholders over the interim last year. So this would not correlate with that at all.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Delegate Moore. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Delegate Lewis.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for this great bill. Thanks to your panel. I'm curious if your proposal would reduce the amount of solid waste that goes to incinerators, such as the waste to energy incinerator in Baltimore City.
That would be the goal, Delegate Lewis.
Thank
One
you.
of the goals.
Thank you. Do we have any estimates or sense of the scale of reduction of incinerated material that we might look at reducing?
No, but in the opposite, I know about of our waste disposal, about 23 to 30% is of food waste and food residuals. So if we can divert that, I mean, we're looking at probably 30% right then and there, depending on the percentage that then goes to the incinerator versus to the landfill.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I do not see any other questions. There are a number of other favorable witnesses, as there should be for any bill of the vice chair. So we'll start virtually with Daniel Broder.
Oh, I am in person.
Okay, but are you Daniel Broder?
I'm not.
Okay, great. So I'm calling on Daniel Broder, who's a virtual favorable witness. So Daniel Broder, go ahead when you're ready.
I'm just so eager.
I am Daniel Broder, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify on behalf of this bill. I would like the committee to give a favorable readout of this legislation. In a time of extremely tight budget, this is something that is critical to municipalities. This is a new stream of revenue that will allow municipalities like Hyattsville, Maryland, where I live, to create zero waste programs that will enable the municipality in turn to reduce its emissions, reduce its tipping fees, and reduce the associated costs that come with hauling away lots of trash. I believe it's critical to pass this legislation as we near a tipping point of a consistent readout of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures as defined by the Paris Climate Accord. We need to do absolutely everything possible to make sure that we limit the environmental damage that we are doing to this planet. This is an extremely smart way to do that, that reduces emissions in a number of critical sectors and reduced costs. I want to thank you all for being supportive of this legislation. and I hope to see its passage during this session. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another virtual favorable witness, Tanvi Mudugula, Clean Water Action.
That's the student.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tanvi Mudugula, and I am a junior at Mount Auburn High School. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today in support of HB 42. A few years ago, I helped start a composting program at my school, and the results were eye-opening. In just 4 months, our pilot program diverted 7,000 pounds of food waste from landfills, and that is the equivalent of offsetting 314 gallons of gasoline. But getting there was not easy. We struggled to secure funding for training, infrastructure, and educational materials, and the only reason we were able to start the program was because of a small, temporary grant. But this experience showed me how much schools can do to fight food waste, but also how much more support we need to make these efforts sustainable. Reliable funding like what this bill provides would allow our schools to grow our programs without the constant fear of running out of resources. But this bill isn't just about reducing waste. It's about education, empowerment, and community. Our composting program inspired younger students to get involved, brought families together, and showed that small changes can lead to big impacts. Imagine the difference we could make if more schools had the opportunity to implement these programs and secure the funding necessary. If we do not act now, schools could lose momentum and miss the chance to build on the progress we've worked so hard to achieve. But with this bill, we can ensure composting and food waste diversion become the norm in Maryland schools. Thank you so much for your time and consideration today.
Great, thank you. We have several other in-person favorable witnesses. Are there any questions for those virtual witnesses? Okay, Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Tanvi. Can she see and hear me? Hi, Tanvi. Thanks for your testimony and for your leadership. I'm curious what career you plan to pursue.
Thank you so much for this question. In the future, I want to major in environmental science and policy. And then I want to, later go into law school and kind of advocate for these bills and maybe be in a position like you guys one day.
Thank you. Well, we encourage you. We look forward to seeing you here in the General Assembly one day. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have additional in-person favorable testimony from Emily Ransom, Clean Water Action, Ava Richardson, Baltimore City Administration, and Jose Coronado Flores for CASA. Come on up.
All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, Chairman Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. My name is Ava Richardson, Sustainability Director for Baltimore City's Office of Sustainability. The Baltimore City Administration supports this bill as it aligns with Maryland's statewide goals to divert waste, in addition to Baltimore City's 2018 Food Waste Recovery Strategy. Additionally, this bill helps to support the long-term goals of HB 264, which passed the Maryland General Assembly in 2021 supported organic waste diversion. The $2 surcharge really supports behavior change so that we can really support infrastructure and investments. To the question about kind of like the degree or volume of waste that we can see diverted, roughly 25% of all residential waste collected in Baltimore City is actually food, based on a 2019 food sort. Also, we see that the Environmental Protection Agency, with the release of its food waste scale in 2023, prioritizes prevention, redistribution, including donation and upcycling, as well as feeding animals as strategies to really support when it comes to food waste diversion. If those cannot be achieved, then composting and anaerobic digestion is suggested. To the left of that food waste scale is incineration and landfilling of waste, and unfortunately, currently, globally, globally in the state of Maryland and Baltimore City, most of our waste is burned or landfilled, and we want to avoid that. So for those reasons, the Baltimore City administration supports this bill, and we thank and appreciate the leadership.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action, here in support of House Bill 42. So Maryland has already made some big strides for organic waste diversion. We have the bill that passed in 2021, as well as an expanded on-farm compost permit exemption. But the big issue that remains for these small businesses and communities is funding, and this is not an issue unique to Maryland. In 2024, the University of Texas and University of California, San Diego released a report analyzing the impact of state organic waste diversion bills on reducing landfill methane emissions. The report cites Massachusetts as the nationwide leader in food waste reduction. The Massachusetts impact of passing a bill very similar to what we passed is a 25% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions from landfills, and that is, they estimate 380,000 tons of food waste annually that they are no longer disposing of. A major reason why the researchers believe that Massachusetts is so successful is because of the investment that they made in businesses and communities to support infrastructure and programs to make this policy a success. This invested in local businesses, creating new jobs. We did some analysis on whether this would drive trash out of state, and what we found that is in many cases the $2 surcharge is a small enough portion of the tipping fee that transportation costs play a much more significant role in determining that final disposal cost. Creating the infrastructure and programming to divert more waste out of our landfills not only reduces methane emission, but it also reduces the volume of waste going into the landfills, extending their lives. The 2023 Maryland Solid Waste Management and Diversion Report estimates that we have about 21 years left, and that's assuming no population growth. So for these reasons, we urge a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman and members of the committee. My name is Jose Coronado Flores. I'm a policy analyst for the organization CASA, Maryland's largest immigrant advocacy and services organization. First off, we'd like to thank Vice Chair Boyce for her leadership on this bill. In our transition to an emissionless and sustainable state, it's critical to offer solutions to reduce the amount of waste that ends up in landfills and trash incinerators. The working class immigrant community that comprises our membership acknowledges the intertwined relationship between food and solid waste, emissions caused by burning or landfilling this waste, the associated emissions of transporting this waste, and the local burden pollution in our communities in being close proximity to landfills, processing and transfer stations, as well as the Baltimore Waste Incinerator. I also want to highlight the Food Waste Reduction and Diversion Grants program that this bill establishes. The grants are to be procured by a variety of entities with the goal of funding projects that aim to reduce food waste through community projects and education. The immigrant community, especially individuals who come from sustainable rural communities, want to bring and engage in our best practices of zero waste and composting in our new communities in the United States. We envision that, that our communities compost their food, utilize the produced fertilizer for community gardens where carriers of sustainability wisdom lead and execute these projects. Furthermore, these programs also promote edible food waste diversion. According to the Maryland Food Bank, about a third of Marylanders are at risk or are food insecure. Yet MDE reports that over 1 million tons of food waste were produced in 2021. Food is a gift that some people struggle to obtain, yet many of us carelessly waste it. For these reasons, CASA urges a favorable report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for this panel? Okay, thank you all very much. We do have unfavorable in-person testimony. Call up Larry Foster, Evergreen Disposal, Lisa Cardell from WM, and Drew Vetter from NWRA.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Drew Vetta, representing the Maryland chapter of the National Waste and Recycling Association. We represent the private sector of the waste and recycling industry in the U.S. and here in Maryland. While we support the goals of House Bill 42, we oppose the surcharge component for the following reasons. One, we would urge a realigned focus on the funding mechanism here. This bill shifts the financial burden of food waste reduction onto waste disposal systems. Our members are handling waste after it's generated, often on behalf of clients who are local governments. This is a necessary public service, and so we would encourage the committee to look at interventions to incentivize food waste and organics diversion that are focused on the production of the materials and focused on large institutions and the like that are actually generating food waste. Two, higher cost. The bill raises costs for consumers and local governments through the surcharge. This is not just our assertion, but highlighted in DLS's fiscal note as well, which summarizes how local solid waste disposal costs will increase. That's local governments. Highlights that the increased costs will be passed to consumers. Points out that many refuse disposal systems are owned by local governments, and that waste disposal costs for all businesses, including small businesses, would increase due to the surcharge. And two, we question the $2 level of the fee. According to the fiscal note, the surcharge is projected to raise $14 million by 2028. Last year, there was a note in the fiscal note that $3 million per year would be enough to get the program started. So we think that the committee should take a look at the $2 level of the fee if this were to move forward. In summary, while the goals are admirable, we would urge looking at alternative funding sources.
Dear Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chair, my name is Larry Foster, and I'm here today on behalf of my company, Evergreen Disposal. We're a family-owned local business proudly serving Southern Maryland community for 16 years. Throughout this time, Evergreen has been a cornerstone of the community, remaining committed to dumping locally in Southern Maryland, even when out-of-state options were available. I'm here to express my strong opposition to HB 42, an unnecessary tax that will place undue burdens on small haulers like myself and the residents we serve. If passed, this tax will force small haulers to either absorb the increased cost, placing additional strain on already thin margins, or pass them on to homeowners, many of whom are already feeling financial pressures. Here's some of the figures that highlight the challenges our industry has endured over the past few years. The cost of new trash trucks has increased from $285,000 to $444,000 in just 3 years. That's a 64% increase. The prices have risen by 32% during the same period, tire prices, excuse me. Recycling dumping fees have escalated from $68 a ton to $105 per ton, a staggering 64% increase. These numbers illustrate the financial strain that haulers like Evergreen are already navigating. Adding a tax that could be reviewed and adjusted every 2 years by the Maryland Department of the Environment creates further uncertainty. Where do the increases stop? Additionally, the proposed tax could have unintended consequences for Maryland's environment. Historically, taxes on waste disposal have led to increased illegal dumping and other unregulated practices, which can result in significant environmental harm. The purpose of this legislation could be undermined by the very behavior it inadvertently encourages. Another critical concern is the economic impact on local communities. By forcing haulers to seek cheaper disposal options out of state, this tax could reduce revenue for local landfills and transfer stations, thereby negatively affecting local economies. With these facts in mind, I strongly urge you to vote no on HB 42. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Lisa Cardell. I'm a Director of Public Affairs for WM. Previously known as Waste Management, we are North America's leading comprehensive environmental solutions provider. We provide waste collection, recycling, disposal services to residential, commercial, industrial, medical, as well as municipal customers throughout Maryland. I'm here today to oppose HB 42. This bill's known as a surcharge or a trash tax to all waste disposed of in Maryland. This tax will be passed on to the generators of the solid waste, which equates to nearly every household and business in Maryland. Every household and business will see an increase on their monthly bills, and why would we want to add additional economic burden on all Marylanders, especially those that can least afford it? During this difficult economic time, most Maryland families and businesses are already struggling with tightening budgets and limited disposable income. This is not the time to impose a new trash tax. This tax will impact all localities in Maryland. Not only every household and business, but every school and government entity will be impacted. Local governments will be struggling to meet the budgets and provide essential services needed for their communities. The new trash tax would put an undue burden on those cash-strapped localities. Constitutionally, the statewide solid waste disposal surcharge would have to be imposed on both public and private refuse disposal systems. I encourage you to vote no on HB 42. Thank you.
So a virtual unfavorable witness, Melvin Fanenstein, Republic Services. Please go ahead when you're ready, sir.
Yes, hi, how you doing? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Vice Chair, Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Melvin Fanenstein. I'm a Maryland resident and the General Manager of Republic Services. I'm here to oppose House Bill 42. Republic Services is a national company that provides recycling and solid waste and environmental solutions. Our commitment to advance circularity, reduce emissions, and decarbonize operations helps us to deliver our vision in partnership with our customers. This is why we have committed 50% of our truck purchase by 2028 to be EV. We have committed $300 million in the creation of polymer centers across North America. Republic Services is a national company with 40,000 employees. We have 10 operating locations in Maryland and 600 employees. This bill would mandate the state to collect a $2 surcharge per ton of solid waste. A solid waste hauler or collector could then collect those fees generated by the services of the solid waste hauler and the residents and businesses of the state of Maryland that we service. The owner or operator of the refuse disposal site, we would have to pay for this charge. An increase in this charge would lead to surcharges and increases in disposal and solid waste for haulers, which will likely be passed on to residents, businesses, and municipalities in the form of higher service fees. Waste collection is an essential service, and added costs could disproportionately impact the small businesses and lower income communities. Waste haulers would also be faced with increases in administrative costs in tracking, reporting, and remitting payment for this surcharge. It is also unclear how haulers would be charged this when disposing out of state. This bill would therefore give Maryland haulers a disadvantage. Out-of-state waste haulers servicing in Maryland could avoid the surcharge by disposing of waste in neighboring states. For these reasons, we respectfully request an unfavorable report.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to this panel. Good to see one of my constituents at the table. I'm curious, your points are well taken. I appreciate your thoughtfulness. But I'm curious whether we are not right now already paying a trash tax. There are impacts associated with excessive food waste. As I think has been explained, excessive food waste ends up in landfills. It can be mishandled and end up as street trash, which feeds vermin and contributes to public health outcomes that are less than ideal, not to mention livability and quality of life impacts. So I'd like to know if any of you would be willing to answer, what alternatives do you see to the trash tax we're already paying by not better handling, more sustainably handling food waste? Whoever can answer that best.
Sure. Appreciate the question and thank you. I think that the point that we are trying to make is a $2 surcharge, the way that it will be passed on to consumers, whether they're local governments, businesses, households, is just another example of something that's going to increase, household everyday cost. There's no argument with what this bill is trying to accomplish in terms of food waste diversion and on-farm organics. We would be in agreement with all of those things. What we are urging is a reconsideration of the surcharge as the funding mechanism for it, given the fact that it's going to be passed on to consumers and households at a time where, other costs are increasing. Whether that's through prioritizing through the budget process or identifying a different revenue source that does not result in it being, passed on in this way. We're open to those conversations, but we would caution against the surcharge as it's currently fashioned. And the other point that I was making, how do we know that the $2 level is the appropriate amount? The fiscal note projects that it raises, $14 million by 2028. There was, last year, this committee passed the bill but removed the funding mechanism. MDE and MDA at the time projected that it would cost about $3 million to kind of stand up a viable program. So if we're going to move forward, could it be at a much different level? How do we know that that amount of money is the right amount of money to be collecting right off the bat, given the projections last year? We have one member with multiple transfer stations in the state of Maryland. That member would contribute under the $2 surcharge almost $2 million, from their several facilities alone, which is more than half of what was projected as needed last year. So we would urge a cautious consideration of where the surcharge is set under the bill.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, to your point, it's difficult to estimate the actual dollar cost of the impacts of, poorly managed, unsustainably managed food waste. But I'm sure there's a smart economist out there who's probably worked on that. In the meantime, it may be that $2 might not address the actual cost, the needs. Would you be willing to consider a different fee structure if we made the case that implementing this proposal would tackle the negative externalities that come from excessive food waste? I mean, what's your thought on that?
So we've been engaged with Delegate Boyce on this issue going back to prior years. We continued those discussions prior to the bill hearing. And believe me, I don't like being here on the other side of the table from one of the vice chair's bills. But we very much appreciate kind of the candid conversation that we've been able to have on this topic to date. And Delegate Boyce testified to the fact that, we can look at other ways to potentially fund this. And yes, we're willing to be a part of that conversation. We'd like to be at the table to identify what those solutions might be.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Let me just suggest, point of personal privilege here, that if you want to be at the table, trash tax, now is not the time, burden on Maryland families, not a good place to start for that constructive conversation. So I would just recommend when you enter the subcommittee process that you think about if you're entering it in good faith, because we'd love to work with you to come up with a good solution here that works for your businesses and our shared constituents and customers. All right. I think that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 42. We'll turn to House Bill 9, Delegate Charkoudian, Public Safety, Food System Resiliency Council, Definitions and Reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I have my panel? Sure. I don't have to. Yeah, I think it, no, sure. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Vice Chair, colleagues, for the record, Delegate Lori Charkoudian asking for a favorable report on House Bill 9. It's a really simple bill, as all my bills are. This one actually is. You might recall we established the Food System Resiliency Council a couple of years back. It was 2021. The goal is to sort of break down the silos of all of the different agencies and groups that work on food policy and really allow us to look at the integrated way that food systems affect so many different aspects of our lives, and then move forward with policies that really enhance and maximize food security, environmental sustainability, local economy, and so on, emergency preparedness. So what this bill does is it changes some definitions to better align them with newer federal definitions, healthy food priority areas instead of food deserts, and defines wasted food. It also changes from having a one-time deadline for strategic plan and reports to doing ongoing strategic planning around these issues. And then our amendments add some additional requirements for aspects of the food system that the Food System Resiliency Council would need to look at. The folks on the panel with me are members of and leaders within the Food System Resiliency Council, and they can also speak to any details or other questions folks have. Thank you.
So again, Dr. Stephanie Lansing from the University of Maryland, representing the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council, where I serve as the vice co-chair. And so over the past year, we found two terms in the original statute that, as Delegate Charkoudian said, are a little outdated or confusing to those engaged in the work. The first of these is the term food desert, which is synonymous with kind of urban areas lacking access to grocery stores and other sources of healthy food, but really to better define areas where access to healthy food is limited, we really should be using healthy food priority areas. We don't only see areas where we need healthy food in only urban areas. And so that really encompasses, if we use the term healthy food priority areas, it encompasses all predominantly lower income areas that have limited access to retailers that sell affordable, healthy food. The other term is wasted food. Wasted food illustrates that food was not intended as its original purpose. So instead of saying food waste, the term that EPA uses, as well as the Maryland Department of the Environment uses, is wasted food. Because the idea is with wasted food, there is still another place where it could go. It is not food waste. It's wasted food that has other purposes that it could serve. So those are some of the reasons for the changes. And again, some of the statute changes are more about our continuing work that we're doing around this space and having that continue throughout the year. Again, we give our report every year, but our work, we meet monthly, we meet weekly during the legislative session. We have a lot of very engaged people in the Food System Resiliency Council, so this is really just aligning the statute language with the really important work that we're doing to reduce food insecurity in the state of Maryland.
Hello, committee. My name is Anna Sierra. For the record, I am the legislative liaison for the Department of Emergency Management, and we are deferring to the distinguished members of the Food Resiliency Council for their subject matter expertise related to the definitions. I'm here really to speak to the strategic planning requirement. We've been working closely with the delegate on adjusting some of those requirements. The Food Resiliency Council is an advisory body, and so doing a strategic plan as an advisory body can be a little bit complicated. They don't necessarily have the operational capability to put that plan into motion, but they certainly have been making really important and really critical recommendations around the policy areas addressed in that plan. And so we've been working on a small amendment to shift those policy areas under their existing reporting requirement from an administrative perspective. And that is what we're here to support. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Rachel Jones, Maryland Department of Agriculture, here to support Delegate Charkoudian's bill and to also support our sister agency, MDEM. MDA serves as co-vice chair of the FSRC, and so we're heavily engaged in the work of the FSRC and aggregating food and trying to figure out how we fill in those gaps and serve the food insecure here in Maryland. Our goals at MDA and several of our programs already align with what the FSRC is doing, and so for the purposes of their reporting and strategic planning, we're just here today to be in support of that because we already have multiple programs, some of which are required to report to the legislature already on their annual findings and the work of the program. But our Agriculture and Seafood Marketing Office, already works to make sure that we promote Maryland agriculture and seafood businesses, works on direct marketing and helping to increase sales of Maryland-based products and help to bolster the local and domestic food system. And then our Certified Local Farm and Fish Program, which Delegate Charkoudian also created the framework for, requires that state entities and institutions meet a goal of procuring at least 20% of their food locally. And so that's something that we've been working on with her. And so there's already a report that the CLFF program reports to the Board of Public Works and to the legislature every year to say how many state entities are meeting that goal. And that's obviously something we're working on, and that aligns with the goals of the FSRC. And then we have our value-added agricultural specialist that's also working on helping to increase how we make sure that folks that are growing a product and then processing it into a value-added product are helping to participate in the food resiliency system. And so our goals align, and we want to just continue to be supportive, and this bill gives us the opportunity to provide that information to MDEM and FSRC.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this panel? Okay, it must have actually been a simple bill. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 9. We'll turn to House Bill 257, Delegate Charkoudian, Natural Resources, Food, Forest, and Foraging Program Establishment. And please bring up the panel if you have one.
Great. Thank you. All right. Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. For the record again, I'm still Delegate Lori Charkoudian, here this time asking for a favor report on House Bill 257. And I'm actually going to start this testimony by inviting everyone to my district. If you have not seen a food forest, we have this extraordinary one at Montgomery College, and a food forest, which you're going to hear more about, is a complete ecosystem forested with the upper story of trees, the medium story of bushes, the ground cover, and an ecosystem that sort of works together in a symbiotic way, but it's all food and edible. And it's in public spaces generally, and the public is invited to come and partake of the food. And is this extraordinary way of creating resiliency in a community, bringing community together to plant, but also making food available to anybody who needs it with no questions asked. And what's beautiful about it is that the trust works. So like people don't come and take too much. People don't come and take more than they need. And we have this example in my district. We have several examples in Prince George's County that we learned from, and I know there's others around the state. And so I am actually officially inviting all of you at any time you want to come see that food forest that we have. But what this bill does is it takes that concept and it combines it with foraging, and it puts it into the Department of Natural Resources. And so you have what I just described, which would be a cultivated food forest. Right now, if you were to create that at DNR, people would not be able to go on there and pick any food because foraging is prohibited at DNR. There's also parts of land on DNR where foraging could happen and could be done in a sustainable way, and other parts where it couldn't be done in a sustainable way. But right now, foraging is prohibited everywhere in DNR. And so the idea behind this bill is to make foraging possible in DNR in both what would be cultivated food forests and in other areas that DNR designates as food forests, thus naturally occurring, thus available for foraging, with a foraging permit. So similar to a hunting permit, which has seasons and restrictions on what you can and can't harvest, and education that goes with it. A foraging permit would have seasons, designated locations, education, and would also have, like a hunting permit, which has lower fees. So the fees themselves support the program, and the fees from a foraging permit would support the cultivated food forests and the education about foraging. But also, the fees would have sort of sliding scale or fee waivers for people who are, have SNAP benefits or other sort of means tested ways. So like as with hunting, where this access to food wouldn't be limited based on the fee for people who are food insecure, you'd make it broadly accessible, but you still would have a fee program that would bring in the money that would cover the costs of the program. So the hope is, and the fiscal note seems to reflect, and you can speak more to this, that it ends up being sort of cost neutral. I will stop there, ask for a favorable report, and look forward to questions and conversations and to when you come and visit our food forest. Would you like to go next?
Sure. Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, for the record, Dylan Baylor, Legislative Director at the Department of Natural Resources. Firstly, I just want to thank Delegate Charkoudian for the invite. This past summer, fall, we went to view this food forest in her district, and I think that sparked a lot of amazing conversation. And that's kind of what has led us here today. A few points that I wanted to touch on. As the delegate just said, and as you heard me say earlier in our departmental bill hearing, the department is kind of based on this idea of user pay, user benefit, in which our special funds are the recipient of permits and various things, and then that revenue goes into supporting the actual resource and the actual activity and the actual work being done. And this bill is in that same premise where it would create the opportunity for a foraging permit and then lead to continued investment into these cultivated and uncultivated food forests. I think we're really excited about this idea because it would kind of create this two-pronged approach to foraging and food forests. One, as the delegate said, is this cultivated idea, which is a more, organized approach, I want to say, to food forests and foraging, where we would be kind of planting different plants there and create more direct access to that. But at the same time, it would also authorize the department to, on our state lands, designate areas where such a foraging permit would allow you to go into and harvest everything from pawpaw to chestnuts to everything in between. So we're all really excited about that. I think a few other things in my 30 seconds. This is really in line too with where the department is trying to go with highlighting the cultural history of this state, and we view this as an opportunity to talk about culturally important foods to the state, all while having important conversations about our indigenous communities. And I think the other thing that we're really excited to work towards is using this as an opportunity to stand up a voluntary reporting system so we can better understand what people want, and that'll help drive the future, all while taking it as an educational opportunity to talk about the various plants and things that people are harvesting. So thank you, Delegate. And we would respectfully request a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. My name is Tierney Acosta, and I'm testifying favorably in regards to House Bill 257. I'm the president and founder of the Permaculture Club at Montgomery College, and I study horticulture and sustainable agribusiness. As of May 2024, 40% of our student body at Montgomery College is experiencing food insecurity. The Permaculture Club has partnered with the Community Food Forest Collective, CFFC, to tackle this issue head-on, specifically on the Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus, and have transformed 33,000 square feet of what once was just grass into a community food forest. This community food forest aims to bring localized and nutritious food straight to our students, faculty, staff, and surrounding communities completely free of charge. Since founding the Permaculture Club in 2023, I've met a wide variety of Maryland residents excited about our Food Forest Collective and the food forest on our campus. But more importantly, they were eager to come back and help. For many, it was the first time they were being introduced to the amazing native food growing within Maryland. American persimmons, pawpaws, black and red raspberries, native grapes like muscadine and riverbank, and blueberries are just some of the amazing foods that are already growing within our state lands. When our visitors learned this, the message became clear. Marylanders are ready to forage. We are ready to rekindle our relationship with the food that grows right here in our state. And although I'm immensely proud of our success with our community food forest on campus, it does not begin to cover the complete need in the state of Maryland. According to the Maryland Food Bank, 1 in 3 Marylanders is currently experiencing food insecurity. By allowing Marylanders access to the food that grows on state lands with this new permitting system, it increases the options that Marylanders have in regards to their own food resiliency. By allowing DNR to waive the permitting fee for our community members who are low income, it ensures that it will be accessible to those who can benefit from it most. Foraging for plants on state lands in the state of Maryland is currently not allowed, and House Bill 257 will not only make it legal, but ensure that it is accessible and regenerative. I urge a favorable report on HB 257, and thank you all for listening to my testimony today.
Thank you. We have a question from Delegate Huey.
I know that there's a food forest in Hyattsville that the city of Hyattsville has planted, and I've been there, and they have it on their website and everything. Do you know how many of these kind of things exist in the state of Maryland?
Well, so DNR has two that sort of qualify, right?
Yeah, so DNR, there's like a weird mismatch of the State Department, and we have two, and then there's a variety of local ones as well.
Yeah. Do you happen to know the?
The founder of Forested, which is, I believe, the food forest you're referencing, is here and will be testifying after us. So I think, Lincoln, do you have an estimate on how many food forests are in the state of Maryland currently?
I'm sorry, I can't hear what you're saying.
Sorry. The founder of the food forest you were referencing is actually here behind us. If I may ask him for an estimate on how many food forests he thinks.
He can.
Or he can.
That's okay. I mean, he can
Perfect.
provide that to us later. That's fine.
The
I just
short
wondered
answer
if
is
you knew.
Not enough.
That's a good answer. Very good answer. How would this bill impact something like the existing one that I know about, where people could just go? They don't need to, it's supported by the city, by local taxpayers, and anybody can come and, harvest whatever they like from it. And it's not, there's no charge. It's just an amenity that is provided like a park.
Yeah, I think that this bill doesn't, at one point I was looking at like a grant program that would support, those kinds of public food forests. And then I looked at our budget. So ended up with something that's sort of self-contained and sufficient. I think that in the broader sense, more food forests, more education about foraging will lead to more of those other sort of non-DNR food forests that you're describing, which I think is worth, supporting. But at this point in time, this bill wouldn't address that directly.
Okay, thank you. So it wouldn't undermine it or make people start paying for something that they didn't get? No,
for sure not.
Thank you.
Don, can you just clarify for me? It sounded like you said DNR has two of these. Do they have no foraging? Is that the?
So there's this, as I said, like this two-prong approach. So we have state lands. DNR owns over 500,000 of state lands, and foraging in those areas is prohibited. At the same time, DNR has invested in plots of land where we have planted different things, different plants that people could harvest in the sense of more of a community forest instead of specific foraging. So this would kind of help bridge that divide and give DNR the authority to designate potential state land where if you have a permit, you could go in and potentially forage, while giving us also the resources to potentially stand up more of these community-driven food forests. Does that answer your question?
It does, but to Delegate Healy's point, the ones you currently have, the ones you have, not the ones in Delegate Charkoudian's district or in Delegate Healy's district, would those be changed by this bill?
No, I don't think those would not be affected. It would give us potentially more resources to stand up more opportunities like that.
Great. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. We have a favorable with amendment piece testimony from the aforementioned Lincoln Smith with Forested. Please go ahead when you're ready, sir.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Lincoln Smith, and I founded Forested, whose goal is to create food forests in 2012 in Bowie, Maryland. I support the bill with a few comments. Food forests are an important emerging form of land management where the goal is to steward thriving forest ecosystems, but also produce food for people. And it can deepen connections between Marylanders and our forests. At our 10-acre Bowie location, we test food forest methods and plants and share that information that we generate. And we also hold forest feasts where people can come and experience persimmon pudding and sochan salad and acorn bread and falafel and the different products that the forest can produce. I also have gotten to create food forests with many private clients and some public lands, including the city of Hyattsville, College Park, and I also work with DDOT Urban Forestry inside of DC. I support this bill with the following comments. I encourage the state of Maryland to legalize foraging on all public land within best foraging practices, which can be enumerated, but it means harvesting sustainably. And if a foraging permit, is created, I request that it be as streamlined and simple as possible, because permits can be a hassle. And I do recommend creating food forests on public lands throughout Maryland where people can learn and forage and connect with Maryland forests in a new and meaningful way. So I encourage a favorable report on this bill.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 257. Colleagues, just a brief preview. I had mentioned a possible voting session on Friday. As you heard on the floor, we're going to be pro forma on Friday, so no voting session Friday. But of course, we're here tomorrow. Fiscal briefing at 1, followed by bill hearings, and the floor before that. So I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Subcommittee announcements, sorry. I think Housing and Real Property is still planning to meet at 5 o'clock on Zoom, even though Chair Holmes is out right now. So keep an eye on your email for that. Okay. Yes, Delegate Foley.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear, couldn't quite hear you. Did you say no voting session on Friday?
Right. The floor is pro forma on Friday, and we don't have bill hearings, so not dragging you in here to vote on 3 bills unless someone really wants to come in just to vote on 3 bills.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So we're not meeting Friday?
Yeah,
we are not meeting Friday. Don't get too used to it. All right. Thanks, everyone.